Now, do you say Moroe or Moroe?
Moroe.
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 Yes, Chair, I'm here in person.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay. Yeah, Mr. Moroe, we will just do the formalities and then we will hear you. Advocate Nele is going to do the administration of the formalities as to whether you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth. And Mr. Which of the families? This July or Mr. July? Mr. July will then take you through the pieces, but for the most part, you will be free to speak and talk to your statement and to anything else that you think will assist us in this project.
No problem, Chair. Thank you.
Advocate Nele.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, Mr. Moroe.
Afternoon.
Will you be taking an oath or will you affirm?
I can take an oath.
No problem. Mr. Thabang Moroe, do you swear that the evidence you'll be giving today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moroe. You've now been sworn in as a participant in the SJN hearings.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Mr. July.
Yes. Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
Yes. You have just taken an oath.
Yes.
And you have provided us with a document, which is, I think, is your statement.
Correct.
And I assume that you, incorporating in that oath, you are incorporating this statement.
Correct.
That this is what you will be saying to this forum.
Correct.
Your statement is structured in the following way. You talk about the township-based cricket. You then talk about your high school cricket,
yes,
in particular at Cares.
Correct.
Then you talk about the Gauteng Cricket Board, which one at that time used to be called Transvaal Cricket Board.
Yes.
You also talk about the commercial part of it, which is your Lions Cricket, which is the franchise,
yes,
PTY. You also talk about soccer.
Yes.
Under soccer you talk about the pension payouts, which are sort of irregular.
Correct.
And you talk about the expansion of the franchises.
Yes.
And soccer. Then you've got a long chapter on Cricket South Africa.
Yes, I do.
So, I leave it then, but you can talk to your statement. You don't have to read it, but in instances where you want to take us to a specific issue, you can read it.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chula. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not obviously going to read everything that I have submitted as my statement word for word, but I will, as guided by you, highlight one or two things coming out of the statement. I'm not sure if I'm going to be asked any questions for clarity or to explain other matters, which I will be happy to take. Should there be any? Okay, thank you. So essentially the reason why I started by talking about my township experience from a cricket point of view, it's to essentially give you an undertaking of where I started with cricket. I started playing cricket in the early 90s through mini cricket, Baker's mini cricket program, and graduated to play hardball cricket, still in the township, and then later on was given a cricketing scholarship to King Edward VII, And it is essentially that period where I started playing cricket all the way to matriculating at King Edward VII that formed the basis of how I think as a cricket administrator, because it was through that period where I could see the changes that I felt as a player were needed in the system. So for some of us, or let me speak for me particularly, coming from Orlando West, Soweto, the only cricket ground that was available to us for use when it comes to formal practice for trials so that we can go represent our township in all these various cricket tournaments was in Rockville, Soweto at Elka Precinct. Now, to get there, there was no transport offered. There was no transport money offered. But practice, nonetheless, would have to start at 3. So you can imagine the difficulties me and my peers had to go through coming all the way from Orlando West to get to Rockville, Soweto. Part of the journey we walked. Part of the journey, if we were lucky enough to have money, we would take taxis. And then if not, then we would have to risk it by taking, illegal free train rides, if I may put it that way. So we would board trains illegally, obviously, but not paying. That's what I mean.
Yes.
For our fare, and we would have to, as in township lungo says, squally stuff. Meaning while the train is moving, you'd have to jump off because you don't want to risk getting off at the station because then you get caught and there'd be repercussions that would follow. So those are some of the things that initially, came out clearing to some of us to say these are some things that need to change. Also, over and above that was the fact that, practice nets were so far from us. So it was these daily struggles that formed the type of thinking that I had or that I have as a cricket administrator. In me going into cricket administration, once I had decided that playing was not really where my heart was, I enjoyed playing cricket, don't get me wrong, but I had figured that I had had enough of playing cricket because of my personal experiences as a player, and felt that I now needed to go into administration where my time would probably be better served in fighting for equality and making sure that we had the level of access that I never had, and by we I mean in the townships. So that's essentially what prompted me to go into cricket administration.
Would you mind giving us some insight into your problems as a player? Some of the, yes.
Not at all, Chair. Not at all. I remember when I was at high school, playing for my school, there was an instance where I was an opening bowler by trade, and we were playing in Pretoria, and this one particular match, opening the bowling, I was struggling to control the ball. So it was the ball was swinging too much, and at that I wasn't really bowling where I needed to be bowling so that I'm effective as per the strategy we had as a team. And I think that went on for about 2 overs or so before I asked my captain to remove me, from bowling. And I said to him, give somebody else an opportunity to use the new ball so that it ages a bit. And then I can come in later when I can gain better control of the ball. The captain accepted that proposal and he acted accordingly. But my coach wasn't really happy. My coach felt that I was taking an easy route out, and I just wasn't ready to be performing at that level. Obviously, this was during a match, so I wasn't going to have an argument with our coach, and also coming from CARES as a school, discipline and respect for the elders is one thing that they really instill at school, so you don't talk back to the elders. So I just took it, and then match carried on. The captain then brought me back onto bowl later when the ball had aged a bit. I could control the ball better, bowled very well. Long story short, we ended up winning the match. And then when we went back to the change room after the match, there were a few guys who had performed well, some with the bat as well, and the coach then said the team must choose who man of the match was on the day. The team felt that, unanimously, the team felt that I'd outperformed everybody. And the team chose me to be man of the match. So part of tradition was that I would be given the match ball to celebrate my performances, so to say. And at that specific moment when the team said Thabang should be given man of the match, the coach says he doesn't think I deserve it, doesn't understand why the team is choosing me, but he gave me the ball anyway. And those were his words to say that, I don't know why you're being chosen, I don't think you deserve it, but I'll give you the ball anyway. So it's instances like that, that made me feel like I just didn't want to play cricket anymore. And in fact, the very same year I quit playing cricket. So I stopped playing cricket for the school. And I'm probably one of the few guys in the school's history who've played first team cricket from the age of 16, being in grade 10, and matriculated without receiving any honors in the school for my performances or my contribution. Most people who've even played for a year walked away with honors. So you would either be given a team blazer if they felt that you didn't outshine or outperform others and get given school colors. But even you would be given a team blazer for just serving for a certain period of time in the first team. I never even got such honors. And you can imagine how bitter those moments were, because even your peers would be expecting your name to be called out when you're at assembly to say, you're being recognized for your service to the school and playing first team cricket, but that never came for me. So I quit cricket and I stopped playing altogether. It was years later that I was approached by one of the township coaches to say, we are starting a new club in Dobsonville because there was now a new ground that had been erected by the Gauteng Cricket Board under the guidance of Cricket South Africa. So he needed some of the guys that he felt could contribute in growing this club to be where it needs to be, so that it can compete at all levels, both on the field and administratively. So that's when I went back into cricket. Initially, I went in to play, and because of employment, availing myself to play wasn't really much of an option anymore. Being a breadwinner at home, I needed to now, quit cricket so that I made more time for work. And that's when my coach then, Mr. Gift Mate, insisted that I assist him with administrating at the club. So that's initially where my administrative career started, if I may put it that way. So I became an executive member of the Dobsonville Cricket Club. A year later, the guys asked me to be chairperson of the club. I agreed to be chairperson of the club. And I was then approached by other club chairpersons. So for instance, the club chairperson of Soweto Cricket Club, the club chairperson of Kagiso, Alexander, and so forth, to say, we are starting a movement where we are going to be fighting against the inequalities that are glaring, as far as our experience as black cricket is concerned. And we would like you to join that movement as chairperson of Dobsonville, so that we can then sit with Gauteng Cricket Board to address these concerns that we have in terms of how cricket is being administered. So, to me, that obviously was a worthy cause, and that's something that spoke to my heart. And needless to say that I agreed to join this movement. The movement called itself Black African Cricket Clubs. And what I didn't know was that the guys would surprise me by asking me to be chairperson of this movement. And they felt that I was better equipped as a leader to be the one that speaks on their behalf and leads them. It took some convincing because I felt that I wasn't ready. I just, a year ago started my administrative career, so I was still learning how to run club cricket. Needless to say, I didn't feel I was fit enough or ready enough to be leading 6 clubs, I think we were at the time. The guys convinced me, I agreed. I became chairperson of the Black African Cricket Clubs. We wrote various emails or letters to the Gauteng Cricket Board wanting to address the inequalities that were there. Part of these inequalities was that to be a Premier League club, which was the highest league, cricket league under the auspices of Gauteng Cricket, was that you needed to have to have rather, I think it was 7 teams at the time in that club. And out of those 7, 1 would need to be a junior team that would be under 13 and below from an age group point of view. Now you can understand that from a township point of view, that's simply impossible. It's very difficult to have 1 full cricket club team in the township. Now, to be told that for you to qualify to play at certain levels, you would have to have 7 teams, that you're already being told that it's not going to happen. And also, if you are not a Premier League club, then you only have 1 vote. Or depending on the level that you would find yourself in, you would have 3 votes as 1 club. But all Premier League clubs would have 7 votes. So that on its own told you that, your white clubs, if I may put it that way, all had 7 votes. And black clubs, we were all just lingering around 1 or 3 votes, with Soweto being the only one that had 7 votes. Purely because when cricket started, everybody played for Soweto. Even players from Alexander would travel to go play for Soweto because it was the only club available. So because of that history, Soweto already had or was meeting the necessary requirements to be a Premier League club. But we were faced with a reality of saying that none of these other clubs would ever be Premier League clubs because they would never get to where Soweto was. As we speak to date, if we were to use those old criteria that we fought and managed to change and win over, none of these clubs would qualify to be Premier League clubs to date. So it was important for us to change these because they were all linked. So if you cannot qualify to be a Premier League club, you do not qualify to have 7 votes. If you do not qualify to have 7 votes, whatever issues that you're going to vote on that are concerning the administration of cricket in the province, as well as the disbursement of funds, I think there was about 16, if I'm not mistaken, clubs of color in the province. We'd get outvoted by 4 white clubs. So the white clubs didn't even need to attend the meetings. They could just choose amongst themselves who would go, and they could just 4 clubs outvote 16 people because purely of the scale of the weighting of the votes in terms of how it was placed. And these were things that we were arguing against to say we are trying our best to work with you guys so that we can get to a point where there is equality, but it's just impossible with these rules. And that's essentially how the Langa Commission came into effect, which is which is essentially the same as this specific commission, except that now it was provincial. So the Langa Commission, which was headed by the late Chief Justice Pius Langa, then asked various stakeholders that were interested in the well-being of Gauteng cricket to come and make submissions like we're doing now, and to speak and air whatever concerns, that it is that anybody might have had around cricket at that time, and we followed a similar process. And long story short, the commission found that obviously there was some serious inequalities that were not allowing black cricket to grow, and to even survive at that, because we were now faced with situations where in some clubs to even form one team that can go play, it was becoming an issue, purely because if a club is going to be given 2,000 rands a month as a stipend from Gauteng Cricket Board, that 2,000 alone just goes to transport. And unfortunately in the townships, there is that stigma that is surrounding cricket. So when even our own people, taxi drivers and taxi owners, bus operators, when we would approach them for assistance from a transport point of view, they would look at us and say, but look at how neat you guys are dressed. You even have tracksuits. People that we normally help don't even have tracksuits. So cricket has money, and there's no ways we can help you guys for free. So those were some of the challenges we were faced with. So we had to pay for transport. On average, per day, we were paying about 800, 900 a day for transport. So you can imagine from that 2,000, there must be diesel money that's going to help you cut the grass at the club. You must have lunch money. And as I said, some of it is for transport as well, and other sundries that was going to help you in administrating the club. So needless to say that 2,000 was nowhere near being enough. The Langa report was then released with all the findings in terms of the racial divide that was there, the inequality that was there in cricket in Gauteng, and how we could work together in essentially changing the status quo. And one thing that was agreed was that the Langa report in itself would be a document that would be used to guide us administrators in running cricket. So what that meant was that the MOI in its entirety, the Gauteng Cricket MOI, had to be suspended for a period of 9 years, because the Chief Justice had realized that Gauteng Cricket would need a minimum of 9 years working with a document that equally represented everybody, so that the cricket board in itself or its administrators could get to a point where we had now drafted an MOI rather, that would represent everybody equally, that would speak of cricket that was progressive and growing in the province. Yeah. And that's the document that was used for those 9 years. One of the things that was disturbing was that once the Langa report was passed, and we had agreed that we would use the Langa report to govern ourselves, and the then administrator, because Gauteng Cricket had to be put under administration, the then administrator was Moroe, was now about to vacate his seat. We now needed to elect a new chairperson, an interim chairperson at that was going to lead the board of Gauteng Cricket. I was asked to be the interim chairperson of Gauteng Cricket. I was supported by the board. I agreed to it. But the funny thing is that 1 week being in the position of chairman of Gauteng Cricket, all black clubs received an email coming from Gauteng Cricket informing them how their stipend was now being increased from 2,000 to about 7,500 without us at board level discussing it. And yet throughout the years we were told there wasn't sufficient funds to increase our stipends. So without even making it a topic or discussing it at board level to, even go through our finances to see what would be an acceptable figure, should we not be able to get what other clubs were being given, the stipend increased on its own miraculously. And these are some of the treatments that clubs were subjected to. And to a certain extent, clubs are still subjected to such treatments. Coaches being told that, the cricket board could not afford their salaries, being paid. Some coaches were taking away 1,500 a month. Some were taking about 4,500 a month. But again, in the same year, we somehow had the funds to now increase coaches' salaries. One, you can ask yourself where these funds all of a sudden came from, because it's not like in that period we signed new sponsorship, or we were getting additional monies coming from elsewhere. But somehow these salaries were increased, stipends were increased, as I said, and life carried on. And we then spoke about how now we want to govern cricket going forward. And one of the things that was important to us at the time was that we needed to choose our own administrators that were going to be representing us at board level. Because in the past, obviously because of being outweighed from a voting point of view, other clubs would choose who would vote, who would come and represent us. So if the black clubs were to say that they wanted Thabang to be one of the directors at the board, I would obviously accept, and there would be a seconder that would propose my name, and then my name would then make it on the short list of people that would be voted in as directors of the cricket board. But if I didn't have the necessary votes, then I wouldn't make it. So essentially we couldn't even choose our own representatives on the board. And those were things that we had to fight against. And then now by virtue of being on the Gauteng Cricket Board, you are also now a member of Lions Cricket, because Lions was our commercial wing of cricket. And the Gauteng Cricket Board owned 51% of Lions Cricket, so we were the major shareholders of Lions Cricket. And by virtue of being the chairperson of Gauteng Cricket Board, it meant that I was either automatically qualifying to be vice president or president of Lions, depending on where we were in our rotational calendar, because one could only serve for 2 years. So what we did was we said for 2 years, Gauteng Cricket would be the chairperson of Lions, and then for the next 2 years, automatically our partners being Northwest, their president would then become chairperson of Lions. So I became vice president of Lions, and this is now where my eyes were now opened to the professional commercial of cricket, because at Gauteng Cricket we deal mostly with amateur. It is province-based, so it is from your semi-provincial team all the way to mini cricket. And at Lions, you only deal with professional cricket. And that's when, my eyes were open to commercial cricket, how commercial cricket worked, the salaries that professional cricketers and their coaches were earning, team management, if I may put it that way, and how monies was used in professional cricket. Needless to say that at that level, we also recognized that some changes needed to be made in terms of making sure that black players were also given or afforded the opportunity to earn big salaries, if I may put it that way, as far as professional cricket was concerned. And the idea was not just to award black players high contracts because they are black, but it was to identify those who qualified, those who we felt were part of the future of Lions cricket, so to speak. Because as you can imagine, players were already contracted. So when we got there, some players were already earning a certain level from a salary point of view. So we couldn't just willy-nilly change those contracts in the middle of the season or in the middle of the contractual tenure. So we had to wait until contracting season came up, and then we would look at the player and say, where do we see this player in the future? And the coach would tell us what his plans were as far as certain players were concerned. The selectors would also have their say, and then we as administrators would then make a call in terms of where or at which level, from a salary pool point of view, those players would come in terms of their respective brackets. And those are some of the things that we changed. One of the things that we also felt that we needed to change was the hiring of black coaches. Until that time, there had never been a black professional coach in cricket. And we felt that's something that we needed to change as Lions. We spoke about it at length, but it took more than one meeting to finally agree to these changes. Also, to get to a point where we had finally accepted that Jeffrey Toyana should be our coach. It took some fighting to a point where our counterparts then asked that we accept that Geoffrey must have a performance clause in his contract, whereas to his predecessors never even had performance clauses in their contract. So we obviously were aware that we were not going to win everything at once. So we accepted that Jeffrey Toyana must have a performance clause as part of his contract. What we also argued for was to ensure that Jeffrey could then contract players that he felt were going to play for him and perform for him, because you can understand how the situation had been before and the fears that he had in terms of, having these performance clauses in his contract and not being able to meet them because maybe players not believing in him. So Jeffrey managed to contract players that he felt would play for him. And for the first time in the history of professional cricket, there were about, I think we had 8 black contracted players in the Lions. And that's something that's never happened in cricket before. So we were the first to do it, and we did it without even Cricket South Africa introducing targets, as far as professional cricket teams are concerned. So we just felt it's something a change that needed to happen. During that season, Jeffrey Toyana managed to win 2 trophies when the Lions hadn't won a trophy in 10 years. But Jeffrey managed to win 2 trophies that season, and needless to say, created a nice spotlight on him as a cricket coach, and paved his way, essentially, because he had many more successful seasons after that one. In 2014, I was then at a Cricket South Africa members AGM. I was then elected to be a director on the Cricket South Africa board. So in 2014 is when I came onto the CSA board, and that's where I had my introduction to national cricket, the national teams rather, and obviously then had access to Cricket South Africa's funds and how we were using these funds and so forth. And in 2016, I became Vice President of Cricket South Africa, the Board of Cricket South Africa, And part of my responsibilities as Vice President of the board was that I would be chairperson of the cricket committee. The cricket committee, as far as the terms of reference are concerned, what it does is that it looks at professional cricket holistically. So not just the national teams, but also the structures of professional cricket provincially, as well as in franchise cricket. So I was then chairperson of the cricket committee, and part of the discussions we had at that level, as far as the subcommittee is concerned, was the changes that needed to happen post the then coach's tenure. The then coach of the national team, men's national team, was Russell Domingo. And we spoke about the changes that need to happen in terms of affording some of our guys an opportunity to coach the national team. And when Russell's tenure ended, the cricket committee specifically identified 2 coaches that we would need to look at in terms of coming in to replace Russell as the coach for the national team. And those coaches were Jeffrey Toyana, as well as Paul Adams, who was coach of the Cape Cobras at the time. They were the 2 most successful coaches in the country, and it was a no-brainer that either both of them would be hired, with one of them being an assistant, or one of them would definitely make the coach for the national team. At board level, we discussed the cricket committee's paper, and the one thing that the board agreed on was that we would hire a black coach. So we left it open-ended, and we said we would hire a black coach to be a coach of the Proteas men's team. And the chairperson of the board in that meeting then said he would announce the panel that was going to be in charge as far as running interview processes and shortlisting of candidates was concerned to essentially fill the post. And needless to say that throughout, history, the chairperson of the cricket committee would form part of this ad hoc committee, if not chairing it. To my surprise, my name was excluded from this ad hoc committee. I then raised my concerns with the chairperson of the board. The chairperson then told me that they felt that, or he felt that there was a conflict of interest in my part, because one of the names that was being looked at was Jeffrey Toyana, and he had previously worked for me. Because when you become chairperson or vice chairperson of the Cricket South Africa board, you then resign from your provincial as well as the franchise boards. So I had obviously resigned from the Lions as well as the Gauteng cricket boards rather, but they felt that there would be a conflict of interest, which surprised me, because I said, we're talking about the national team here, and last I checked, we are all South Africans, so everyone is conflicted. I don't think anybody would want to hire a manager or a coach in the national team that wasn't fit enough to perform at that level, because we all understood the power that the men's team has from a commercial point of view, and how important it was, or it is rather, to keep them performing and giving good results at that level because of the commercial value that they then attract as far as the Cricket South Africa coffers are concerned. So one would never want to mess with that because that's essentially the backbone of all cricket in the country. So that comment surprised me. Needless to say, I needed to also show faith in my colleagues, so I accepted that I wasn't going to be part of this ad hoc committee. And then the ad hoc committee worked on the advertisement, published it to fill the post, and then obviously started with their process. They shortlisted the candidates that they wanted to interviewed those candidates. And then a month or so later, in one of our board meetings, the committee then came back with a report to tell us who they had chosen as the preferred candidate to be the coach of the national team. Now, during that entire period, even at board level, we ourselves were talking about how Jeffrey Toyana was head and shoulders above other coaches purely because of his performances. Now, when the subcommittee or this ad hoc committee, the chairperson of the ad hoc committee announced that they had preferred Mr. Otis Gibson to be the coach of the national team, it came as a surprise.
Otis Gibson was the West Indian.
Yes, who was based in the UK.
Yeah.
So it came as a surprise to us because we were talking about the short period that the coach would have before the next World Cup. And how we wanted a coach that was familiar with all our players in the system, a coach that was familiar with the South African cricketing environment, and somebody who was going to be able to hit the ground running. So now choosing somebody who didn't even live in this country came as a surprise, given all these things that we had listed as concern that needed to be addressed in appointing a coach. So Otis Gibson was then announced to us at board level. Some members, including myself, asked where Jeffrey Toyana's shortcomings were because we were all sure that Jeffrey is going to be the coach of the national team. I mean, it was everywhere in the media, in the papers and radio, everywhere. Everybody was punting Jeffrey Toyana to be the coach. The chairperson of the ad hoc committee then told us that they were not happy with how he articulated himself, and they were not happy with his presentation skills. I mean, that was a concerning feedback to give to us because we were not hiring him to do presentations or public speaking. We wanted somebody who knew how to coach the crop of players we had at the time and somebody who could give us good results. And although we were going through this formal process, we all sort of felt Jeffrey was the guy. Only to be told that no, Jeffrey would not be the guy.
But
And
Mr. Moroe, what then happened to the resolution of the board? Was that issue discussed as to, because the resolution of the board was that a person of color, whether Jeffrey or Paul Adams or somebody else, must be appointed. And surely that did not include a person from West Indies.
Yes, the resolution definitely didn't. But when the resolution was then raised, that's how the chairperson of this ad hoc committee at the time, Mr. Norman Arendse, as well as the board chairperson, Mr. Nenzani, they then defended Otis as a black person, so therefore a person of color. And he met the requirements in terms of what we were looking for. We argued differently, but for the sake again of unity and and trusting our colleagues in terms of the process that they'd followed, we supported this decision. But in supporting the decision in the name of Otis Gibson, we then said we should then ensure that either Paul Adams or Jeffrey Diana becomes the assistant coach. And then the majority of the board at the time felt that Jeffrey should be the one that we push for, with Paul Adams probably coming in as a spin bowling coach. Now, towards the end of the meeting, the chairperson of the board, Mr. Nenzani, then says to me, they are now handing over the process of onboarding the national coach and making sure that his support staff is onboarded to myself. And I felt, I mean, I wasn't part of hiring this coach, but now I must be the one who goes to tell him that we are essentially wanting to dictate on who your support staff must become. Now, I felt that I was being set up, but I agreed to do it. So I welcomed Otis into the country, myself with the chairperson of the board and Mr. Norman Arendse, who was the chairperson of the ad hoc committee that was running the process in appointing the head coach. We met with Mr. Gibson at OR Tambo International, and I then obviously introduced myself to Otis, told him what my role was in the board, and what my role was going to be going forward in working with him. And we then in this meeting told Otis what our thinking was as far as his support staff was concerned. Immediately Otis raised concerns, and one of the concerns he raised was that we were specifically hiring him to win the World Cup. And if we want him to win the World Cup, then we needed to give him leeway to choose who his support staff would be, because he too felt that he can only win the World Cup if he had a support staff that believed in him, not people who were just, co-opted to be there, which we felt was a fair point that he raised. And we said, okay, how we feel as a board. We will not dictate to you. So you have the go ahead to go and hire who you feel you want as support staff. A couple of days later, I got a call from Otis asking that we meet. He was ready for us to start the formalities in terms of appointing his support staff. I agreed to meet with Otis. And Otis said that he wanted to hire, I forget the name of the gentleman, as his assistant coach, and the gentleman also resided in the UK.
Dale Bankins.
So Dale came later.
Oh.
So this was the first name that came up. I'm just forgetting the gentleman's name.
All right.
And we made some inquiries, and the salary that the man was demanding, as well as the perks, were just not what we had budgeted for. The salary he was asking for was higher than that of Otis. So we just felt, we were not going to put ourselves in that situation where we were paying our assistant coach more than what we were paying the head coach, if I may put it that way. So Otis then came back and proposed that Dale Benkenstein become his assistant coach. I couldn't accept Dale Benkenstein being the assistant coach purely because he was a high school cricket coach at the time and did not have the necessary qualifications to be coaching in the national team, let alone being assistant coach. I raised these concerns with Otis, and I told him that I couldn't see myself supporting such a decision. He felt that the decision needed to be supported. That was his final decision, and that I should raise it with the board. So that's fine, I'll raise it with the board, which is what I did. The board supported me in saying that we cannot hire a high school coach to come and be an assistant coach when we have all these other professional coaches who have the necessary qualifications as well as track record, to back their credentials.
Did you get to know what informed Otis's preference for somebody who, by all accounts of people who were local, felt was not suitable for the position?
At that time, I think what the chairperson of that ad hoc committee said to us was that what influenced their decision was that Otis had played international cricket. Otis was applying his trade in the United Kingdom. He was part of the management team for the English men's team at the time. So they felt that given the fact that the World Cup is also going to be in England, he would be familiar with the landscape of cricket in the UK, and he would understand the grounds better, and he would help the teams prepare better for the World Cup at that. So that's the reasoning that was given to us. I then went back to tell Otis what the board had decided. He was obviously unhappy with the decision that the board had taken.
Just before you go further,
Yes.
What were the proponents of Otis saying to Advocate Vusipikoli's support for you, especially insofar as in your statement you say he was questioning and pointing out the reason why you should omit to appoint a South African coach, according to what you say, that had won every cup on offer in our franchise competitions. I mean, how was that, viewpoint by Advocate Pikoli met by those who were insisting, quite apart from what you are saying?
Correct.
Because,
We supported that thinking. Personally, I supported that thinking as well. There were some members of the board who supported that argument, but the chairperson of the board, Mr. Nenzani, then stepped in and asked the entire board to support the decision that was taken by the ad hoc committee.
So, but what was he saying about that? What seemed to me, or what should it appears even to you, he was making a very valid point. We have a South African coach. He had won every trophy on offer in the franchise competitions.
Correct.
So was the prevailing argument by those who supported Otis the fact that, he had international experience, or what? I'm trying to find out what it was that was held as a counter proposal to especially the viewpoint that you and Advocate Vusipikoli were putting out in favor of a local person who, according to Vusi, had won every trophy on offer in our franchise competitions.
Correct. Chairperson, outside of the fact that Otis had played international cricket, and at the time he was applying his trade in England, there really wasn't much. I mean, I remember one of the pointers being raised was that he, at some point, played cricket in KZN. So that was used as a reason to say he sort of understands South Africa as well. So really there wasn't much given outside of those reasons. But then we supported the decision. As I said, Mr. Gibson wasn't happy with the decision that the board had taken. with respect to the position of the assistant coach. He voiced his unhappiness with me, but said that he needed, or he wanted me to afford him the opportunity to then have one-on-ones with all professional coaches in the country so that he can then choose who he felt was the guy to then take over as assistant coach. I then agreed. I thought that was fair. Have a look at the coaches in the system, which Otis then did, or at least he came back to inform me that he had met. I think it was probably about a month later, if I'm not mistaken, that he had met with all the coaches in the franchise system. He had one-on-ones with them. He had watched some of them coaching their teams at practice, some during live games, and he saw how they were responding to certain pressures of the matches. And he had come to, a conclusion in terms of who he felt was suited enough to be assistant coach. At the time, he then said that he would prefer Mr. Malibongwe Maketa to be his assistant coach. That also surprised me, purely because, as I said at the time, we had Paul Adams, we had Jeffrey Toyana. Those were the successful coaches in the country. And Malibongwe had only just been a franchise coach for one season. So he hadn't really been tested in the system to say that, he's got what it takes, and he hadn't built enough track record, so to speak, but he had won one trophy, I think, in that season. I then told Otis of my concerns, but supported his decision nonetheless. And we then announced Mr. Malibongwe Maketa as Otis's assistant coach, and then later on populated other vacancies that were there as far as the support staff is concerned for the national team head coach. The stats are there for themselves in terms of how Otis performed. We weren't happy with Otis's performances. I was on 2 occasions asked by the board to sit down with Otis to address our concerns because the team wasn't performing well. I met with Otis and raised these concerns with him to say, listen, this is how the board feels. Now, once I raised these concerns with Otis, to my surprise, I think it was probably a day later or 2 days later, my name was already in the papers as someone who was interfering in the running of the national team and how I wanted to influence team selection in preference to other players, particularly players of color. So this is where my demonization by South African media started, where I was personally labeled as, Jacob Zuma of cricket. Those were the words being used.
By which you understood what? What was the insinuation? As you unpack this over time.
Correct.
Because it seems that it was intended to be an insult, the way it was put.
Correct. How I understood it to have been put is that I wanted to, one, kick out white players from the national team and replace them with black players that didn't even meet the criteria or qualify to be playing at that level. And that, two, I wanted to do it at all costs. It didn't really matter what it meant as far as the national team, how it looked, as well as how it would perform. I was just pinned as this individual who wanted his way, or it was the highway, essentially. So if you didn't do what Thabang wanted, Thabang got rid of you. That's essentially how I was labeled in the media. And you will see that's how it essentially lasted until I got suspended by the board for allegations of misconduct.
Did you have those powers though?
No, I didn't. But what you will see is that at no point does the chairperson of the board or any president of the members' council come out to say Thabang does not have these powers.
Anyway.
So those rumors in terms of how I was behaving were allowed to be peddled for a long period of time in the media.
So there was no one from Cricket South Africa who sought to correct the wrong impression that was being conveyed, that you had the power and the authority to do that which was being attributed to you.
Nobody, Chairperson. Nobody to this date. I mean, what also came to the fore was during a radio interview last year, around about this time, the then chairperson of the board, Mr. Nenzani, being interviewed by Robert Marawa when he was asked specifically about this period where we were discussing Jeffrey Toyana. He said it was unfortunate and that Jeffrey Toyana, yes, was shortchanged by Cricket South Africa. I mean, for the chairperson to come out and say that on radio, when we had an opportunity as a board to do what we knew was right at the time, and he unilaterally, took that decision away from the board and said that we needed to support what was being put in front of us by the chairperson of the ad hoc committee in appointing Mr. Gibson, was just wrong. It's just wrong. But it's also testament to how we as administrators in Cricket South Africa and in our various provinces have behaved throughout the years. This is just how people of color have kept missing opportunities that could have been afforded to them by us administrators. And then we then later on come to say it's unfortunate. If you look at the coaches that I'm talking about, if you look at Jeffrey Toyana's career, if you look at Paul Adams's career, immediately after these announcements were made in terms of appointing Otis and his support staff, Jeffrey and Paul Adams somehow started having misunderstandings with their own players in their franchise teams, started fighting with their own boards. There were articles about them and their drinking problems in the media and how they were unfit to be coaching at this level. To date, you don't have any coaches who've been outside of probably Inokungwe who've been as successful as Jeffrey Doyan and Paul Adams, but none of them are coaching franchise cricket today. So we as Cricket South Africa literally killed the careers of these two gentlemen. And we allowed, again, the media to play a key role in ensuring that these guys do not have professional coaching positions as far as their future was concerned. And these are the inequalities that are there, that are glaringly there, if you look at the landscape of South African cricket. Now, in 2017, we as Cricket South Africa unfortunately had to part ways with our then CEO at the time, Mr. Arun Logat. I remember it was in a board meeting in Sandton where I was then asked to recuse myself when we were discussing the issue of the then CEO who had just walked out of the board meeting.
You were still a vice president?
I was still vice president of the board. I recused myself for probably about 10 minutes, and I was called back into the boardroom. And when I got back into the boardroom, the chairperson, Mr. Nenzani, said that the board had decided that they would like me to assist them in stabilizing the operations of the organization and step in as acting CEO. I then said to the board that I had no desire of coming into the operations of Cricket South Africa, and that I felt that, you know, I was still on the right path as far as cricket administration and my growth as an administrator is concerned, because needless to say, I was in line to become the next chairperson. I had obviously lobbied support from other presidents and spoken about the changes that I wanted to see happening in cricket. Now, as I had said, you know, in the media, I was this guy or this irresponsible administrator who just wanted to destroy cricket. And, you know, in some of these journalists writing their opinion pieces would warn the cricket community about the downfall that South African cricket was about to experience or go through because of me, and how powerful I was as an individual, how I could steamroll the board in getting the board to take decisions that I wanted to take. And these were some of the concerns that I had in coming into the operations of Cricket South Africa. It is unfortunate that in preparing for this submission, part of what I wanted to use as annexures for the evidence that I wanted to finish yourselves with is in board minutes and board packs, and some would be in subcommittee packs. And these are things that I raised in my very first meeting with the board. But unfortunately, in trying to prepare for my, for at least what I thought was going to be a disciplinary hearing that the board was supposed to afford to me, I had asked the board to give me access to some of this information so that I can prepare myself for my disciplinary hearing, to which obviously the board refused. So
disciplinary hearing subsequent to
meetings, to being correct.
Okay.
Correct. So I needed to use what I had presented to the board, what had been said in board meetings, as part of the evidence to say, but these are things that have been there from day one. I felt it was unfair that, you know, 2 years down the line, the board is now raising these things as if they are new things. And these are things that, you know, came with me as Thabang. So with the board not affording me access to this information, obviously I couldn't partake in the Fundoti investigation. And the reason why I said to Fundoti, to Mr. Ernest at the time, I said to him, Ernest, you can understand that what you are purported to be investigating is essentially what's going to be used against me as charges at a later stage by this very same board. So whatever questions you have for me, I need to make sure that they're going to be exactly the same answers I give to the board when my disciplinary hearing comes. So I cannot be seen to be an individual who is shifting goalposts or giving different versions of what the truth is. So I want to help you by giving you some of the answers in the information that you are looking for from me, but it is difficult to do so without being given access to the information that I've asked the board to give me. Needless to say that the board then said that they would support me and they would make sure that I got the necessary protection, how they would work with me if I became or accepted to become acting CEO of Cricket South Africa. I remember specifically Mrs. Zola Tamai at the time, jokingly, depending on how you want to look at it, because she was laughing at the time when she said it, but she said to me, it's not a request, Thabang. Cricket South Africa needs you. You're the only one who's always been close to the organization and the operations of the organization, the only one who understands what's happening. So this is a directive. We are no longer asking you. Tomorrow we are announcing you as the acting CEO. So we laughed about it, and I said, well, thanks for the vote of confidence, but my concerns remain. As I said, in my first meeting with the board as acting CEO of Cricket South Africa, I raised these issues, the attacks that were coming from the media. Thabang is starting his crusade of kicking out Muslim people. Thabang is starting his crusade of kicking out white people from cricket. Just watch how black cricket is going to be. Even when I had meetings with ex-administrators outside of Cricket South Africa to talk about what I essentially thought was the right thing to do in running the operations of Cricket South Africa going forward, some of these administrators would ask me if there still was space for white people in cricket. Those were some of the questions that I had to field from my colleagues because, every day in the media, I was this, radical transformation guy who will stop at nothing to get what he wanted. I kept informing the board of these articles, of these rumors that were doing rounds in the media and how uncomfortable they made me. But at every turn, the chairperson of the board, together with the board members, would say that don't worry about them writing these rumors. And I said, but it doesn't help if there are no counter statements coming out there to show and tell people what the real truth is when it comes to the administration of cricket. And I was then assured that the board chairperson would send out some sort of press release in how in helping the our cricketing community at large, as well as the South African citizens, understand what was happening at Cricket South Africa and how I got to be where I was. That never happened. Because of how we had performed at the previous World Cup, I think this was the 2015 World Cup? No, 2015, I think, before the 2019 one. I think it was 2015. The South African community at large was very unhappy with how we had performed. And part of what we did as a board to address these concerns was we commissioned a professional cricket inquiry where we called in ex-players, ex-administrators, ex-coaches to say, what do you feel needs to change? What do you think we need to do as a board to take cricket forward and to ensure that the Proteas can one day, or at least in the next World Cup, which was the 2019 World Cup, they deliver in terms of winning the trophy, because we have been world beaters before. We've been number one in all formats, but we've just never managed to go, the whole 9 yards and win the World Cup. And this is something that the cricketing community was hungry for, and that's why when we hired Otis, the announcement that came out to say we are specifically hiring you to win the World Cup, because it was in line with the plans that we had put in place from 2015 already. So in early 2019, I think, in early 2019, I got a call from one of the players in the national team. And he asked me if I would be in in Port Elizabeth at the time because the national team was playing in Port Elizabeth. I told this player that I would be there. Unfortunately, Chair, what I'm saying right now is not part of this submission, as I had informed that I was making some notes in terms of things that I had forgotten to include in here.
That's all right.
But I met with this player in Port Elizabeth, and when I met, so this player asked to meet with me in private because there was fear of victimization. Because as I said, in the media, if you were seen as either an administrator or as a player, if you were seen to be meeting with Thabang, you were automatically pitted to be in Thabang's corner as far as this crusade that Thabang was on is concerned. So even players in the national team, when they wanted to raise concerns with me, if they needed my input on things, they would be afraid to meet with me in public where people could easily recognize them, where the media would see them with me. Even coming to the offices here, players were afraid to do so. So they preferred meeting where we essentially wouldn't be seen, because once a player comes to see me in the office and we have a meeting, sometimes players would just come to greet me because they were driving past, and sometimes had genuine issues that they wanted to discuss with me, hence they would come here. But once a player was seen to be with me, or a member of staff of the management staff in the national team was seen to be with me, they would immediately get a call from their seniors to say, "What were you doing there? What were you talking about?"
Do you know why was that kind of attitude extended towards you and those who surround themselves with you?
I can honestly say that in my understanding, I feel it was that way because I was pretty much vocal about transformation. And I had a track record, from an administration point of view, that showed that I wasn't just vocal about it, but I acted on decisions that we had taken, on various boards that I served on to make sure that there was change in cricket. So I think it's just fear of change. It's just the fear of change that was there, and it is this fear that allowed people to call me and label me how they saw fit, and used it obviously even to their advantage to make sure that I was then pushed out of cricket at a later stage. So I met with this player. And this player, after obviously greeting and just, having a general discussion, then said, "Listen, this is the reason why I want to meet with you." The first thing he asked me was, "What have you done to these people?" And I asked him, "What do you mean by these people?" And then he said, the coaching or the management staff, as well as the media. And then I said, I think it's pretty obvious, given how they had decided to label me, it's pretty obvious what is it that I've done and why they don't like me. And I said, why do you say that? What did you hear? Excuse me. The player then told me that in them walking back to the hotel, he had misplaced one of his items in his kit, and he was busy looking for this item, and he walked into one of the rooms that was being used by the team. Because when the team is playing or traveling, when they get to a hotel room, obviously they would get booked their rooms, that they would sleep in. But we would also book a few extra rooms. One they would use as a physio room, the other they would use for meetings and so forth. And you'd have like a boardroom that would book where the team could have meetings and things like that. So we booked several rooms in hotels, and that was the norm. So in him walking into one of these rooms, he then heard that there were people. There was a private meeting happening here, and this meeting, there was some players and there was the management of the team in this meeting. But what was being discussed at this meeting was the World Cup that was coming. This was the World Cup in 2019. And in particular, what was in discussion here was Plan B. So I don't know what Plan A was as far as this discussion is concerned. Neither did this player know as well, because he walked in this time where Plan B was being discussed. What Plan B was, it was very simple. Plan B was, how are we going to react, or what are we going to tell the media and the public should our performances at the World Cup be below par? And the decision was simple. What this player said, what he heard one of the guys say was, we should blame everything on the CEO. Plus, our media guys don't like him anyway, so it will sell. Now, obviously, this made me very uncomfortable.
And our media guys referring to?
The South African media.
The South African media. And there was obviously also, rumors doing the rounds in saying that there was certain members of the media that the team preferred to use. So every now and then, there are certain members of the media that would get invited to the hotel where the team was staying, and those are the guys that would be given the scoop in terms of what was happening in cricket, whether it's in the national team itself or it's administratively. So that's how you will notice that in cricket there's always a leak. Nothing is private in cricket. We'd have a meeting as a board discussing certain issues, and immediately after the board meeting, you're getting a call from the media asking you about what you had just said from that meeting. So there was also a culture of recording meetings for certain members of the media, because you as Thabang, you didn't want to be seen to be supporting a certain narrative as far as cricket administration is concerned. So because I want to show that I'm not part of this movement, or I do not affiliate with this kind of thinking, I will help you by giving you news that you can report on, news that you can write about, that nobody else would have access to. And that's essentially how administrators carried themselves at this level. I raised it as one of the concerns, obviously, but it was an issue that was never addressed. Yes.
Do you recall which media houses in general would write some of these negative articles about you, or would have first-hand information of board meetings and so forth?
I mean, it was a lot, and given where I was, honestly, I tried as best as I can to not focus on such, because I felt I had a lot on my shoulders, as it were, and focusing on these negative articles was something that I definitely did not want to do. I felt it would just exhaust my energies, and I would find myself just constantly focusing on worrying about them rather than delivering on what I needed to do. But after this player now gave me this information, I then said to the player, I am aware in terms of how, you guys as players are victimized for coming out and speaking the truth, or even speaking your mind in terms of how things should go in your respective teams. What do you want me to do with this information, given that I know that you are afraid of being victimized? He said to me that, well, speak to the chairperson of the board. And then I said to him, or I asked rather, would you be willing to sit with myself and the chairperson of the board to tell the chairperson this piece of information that you've just given to me? The player said, if you can make sure that nobody else knows about it, I'm happy to sit with the chairperson. Because, again, I was looking at it from a point of view saying, I'm already being put in the media as this destructive force, who is not supportive of the national team and how they want to do things, but instead wants things to be done in his way. And this is a guy who is essentially going to kill cricket in this country. So you can imagine me going to the chairperson to give him this piece of information without anything to substantiate or some form of evidence, how it would look. It would be like he's already starting to find a way to cushion, his behavior and how things are essentially going to present themselves in future.
Can you please help us?
Yes.
When this player went to this meeting or this room where Plan B was being discussed,
yes,
who were these people?
It was the management of the team and some of his teammates.
And who comprises the management of the team?
What this player told me at the time was the coach was there, the head coach. The manager of the team was there. I think also the assistant coach, if I'm not mistaken, and the betting coaches were there.
Who were these people? This is 2019. Then.
This is 2019, yes.
Who was the head coach?
At the time, the head coach was Mr. Otis Gibson.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. The manager of the team?
The manager of the team at the time was Dr. Mohammed Musaji.
Okay.
Dr.
Mohammed Musaji.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Now, I then set up a meeting with the chairperson of the board. I told the chairperson of the board that I've just met with player X, and this is what this player told me. The chairperson was obviously concerned. We had a follow-up meeting with the vice chairperson of the board, because I had obviously been acting CEO now, forced to step down from being vice chairperson of the board. So at the time, the acting vice chairperson of the board, at the time the chairperson of the board rather was Mr. Beresford Williams. So we met, all three of us, and I gave them this information, and I even told them that the player was ready to meet with them to discuss what this player had heard. I was then told that it wasn't necessary to meet with this player because this player had gone at great lengths to, risk their career by coming to me and telling me this, and that they didn't want to put further strain on this player. But this matter will then be discussed at board level. I thought, okay, it's fair to want to protect the player, but I don't see how or what is it that we can do about this information as a board. Nonetheless, we discussed it at board level. Most of the board was disappointed, to say the least, to discover that such a conversation had happened. And the decision that the board had took immediately was that should they not perform as per expected, then everybody would be fired. And the board would talk about this matter in public. I felt, okay, that was good enough. If the board can address it in public, it's good enough. Because obviously if you have a team that's going to the World Cup and it's not confident in how they're going to perform to get there, and they're already planning how they're going to get away with murder, if I may put it that way, in underrepresenting the country at the World Cup, that was concerning to me. and knowing that I was essentially the one who was earmarked as the scapegoat.
Can you explain that part for me? You, at that time, you were acting.
By this time now, I had now been confirmed as the permanent CEO.
You are a CEO.
Yes.
So how were you going to be implicated in what happens in the field as the CEO?
Correct, correct, because it's important to tie that up. We had 2 meetings with the team management and the captain as a board to ask them about their preparation for the World Cup and how they felt. And in both meetings, they were pretty positive. They were happy. They spoke about the support that I had given to them and how happy they were in terms of the support I had given to them to prepare for the World Cup and anything else that they needed to make sure that they were ready to go to the World Cup. Changing of schedules, making sure that what they asked of me to assist them with administratively was essentially delivered. But we had one of the worst World Cups that the team has ever had, at least since I've been involved with cricket administration, and in every tour that we either host or when we are traveling, when the team comes back, there is a report back of the tour in terms of how they felt everything happened. And it would also discuss performances. But it was disturbing to see the report that came from the team. So the report that came from the team, I'm now talking about the head coach's report. I'm talking about the captain's report. I'm talking about the report of the convener of selectors, Mr. Zondi at the time. When these reports came back, these reports now changed tune to the 2 meetings we had had before the team left for the World Cup. These reports spoke about how I had not given the team the support that they needed before they went to the World Cup. How I took certain unilateral decisions that impacted the team at the World Cup. So because of these decisions and how it impacted them negatively, that's why they couldn't perform optimally at the World Cup. So you now had the coach's report, you had the team manager's report, you had the captain's report, I think you had the convener's report, now all pointing fingers at the CEO. What obviously they didn't know is that we had discussed this at board level to say something like this was coming. Now, the board, from an evidence point of view, in going through these reports, the board now realized that actually what I had given to them is feedback from this meeting where Plan B was discussed was actually the truth, because we met with these people about 2 months or so ago, and everything was perfect according to them. Everything that they needed, the CEO had given them. But now they come back from the tournament and they're singing a completely different tune now. The board was disappointed.
Was the captain in 2019?
It was Mr. Faf du Plessis at the time. The board then said that we are disappointed. We want to meet with the team. We want the team to explain these reports. So we called a board meeting, an emergency board meeting, where I invited the head coach, invited the manager, the captain, and the convener as well, to be part of the board meeting so that they can talk to their reports. They obviously spoke to their individual reports. Questions were then raised by board members to say, but if this is essentially what you're saying is the truth, why was it not there before you left for the World Cup, so that we can then ensure as a board that we put all the necessary measures in place or investigate if an investigation was needed to make sure that Thabang delivered in his mandate as the CEO in supporting you as the national men's team so that you are able to deliver the World Cup to us. All sorts of excuses were given in terms of why the matters were not raised then, fear of victimization. I'm not sure how I single-handedly could, victimize a group of people, and make decisions that would impact their performance or them representing the team or the country at the World Cup. But that's how it was essentially pitted. The board then told the management and the captain how unhappy they were with these reports and that they were not accepting these reports, and that further communication will come to the team and the captain as far as a decision that the board was going to take is concerned. It's in that board meeting that the board told me that they would like me to fire everybody, team management, and they needed a change in terms of who the captain was going to be. Around the same time, there was we were hosting the Cricket South Africa Awards. So I then said, look, the awards to the board, I said to the board, the awards are important. Although we have performed poorly at the World Cup, there has been some stellar performances in the season that are worth celebrating. And this is also one opportunity that we get as a cricketing community to come together and celebrate, cricket as a whole. So can I please start with these important meetings immediately after the awards? Because now I didn't want, negative publications in the media influencing the awards, so to speak. So the board agreed that I can start immediately after the awards, which is what I did. So I met with team management as well as the captain to tell them, no, I don't think I met with the captain, I only met with team management, to tell them the decision that the board had taken and how the structures were going to change going forward, because this is what the board wanted. Now, yes.
Just before you continue, I just have two questions regarding these meetings which preceded the squad going to the World Cup.
Yes.
Are you on record there?
Oh, you can hear me? Oh, okay. Yeah, I have two questions concerning the two meetings.
Yes.
Which preceded the squad going to the World Cup.
Yes.
Were these meetings recorded? For instance, the meeting between you and the board, during which you were informed that the player does not have to come and come and explain what happened in the meeting where Plan B was discussed. Was it recorded that meeting at any minutes? And then the second one, where the squad, no, not the squad, the leaders of the squad and the management came then to present to the board before jetting off to the World Cup, and whether that meeting, was recorded, and whether there are minutes in relation to that meeting. Lastly, the third one, when upon their return, when they came to present, what is it that they were contending that you did not support them?
So to my knowledge, the meetings were recorded and minutes should be available. But like I said, in me trying to prepare for what was supposed to be my disciplinary hearing, this sort of information I was refused access to. So to say whether it exists or not, that's something else. but from a management point of view, we made sure we record all meetings.
Perhaps you could assist us because I think the first time you mentioned this, I thought that you could probably send through to us the information that you sought, whether minutes or whatever, which you didn't get. Send that to us, and then we will endeavor to get those, just to get a sense in the context of your presentation what it was
correct
that you wanted.
Correct. So,
yeah.
So I am aware that some information you will need, which is obviously not at my disposal.
Yes.
So I can highlight which dates for you to look at
yes.
From a board meetings point of view,
yes.
subcommittee meetings and so forth,
yes.
so that you can ask CSA to furnish you with that information.
Exactly.
For you to be able to go through. Yes. To answer...
Yes. I think the third one was...
Yes, I was about to answer the third question.
What is it that is,
so
the guy said?
One of matters raised as me being unsupportive was the IPL. The IPL is a cricket tournament that happens in India.
Mm.
And the IPL was happening just before the World Cup. And we had a few players who are in the national team who are also going to partake in the 2019's edition of the IPL. But because of it being a World Cup year, some members of the ICC, if I may put it that way, some cricket bodies outside of South Africa had decided or had held talks with the Board of Control of Cricket in India, the BCCI, to say that although we are going to support you in releasing our players for this year's edition of the IPL, we are, however, going to recall some of our players to come early, so to leave the tournament early, so that they join their various squads and prepare for the World Cup. Now, that would be a request that comes from team management. It's not a request that is done by administrators. So the team managers would have to come, or the coach would have to come and say, these players are going to the IPL, and I would like all of them to be recalled early before they go, or I would like these specific ones to be recalled early so that we can start with the physio work that needs to be done in preparing them for the World Cup. That never happened in our case. So the coach or team management never came to me to say, because dates were already out. We all knew when the World Cup was going to be hosted. We all knew when the IPL was, but nobody came until I think a week before the IPL tournament started. I was given a call by, first it was Mr. Otis Gibson, and then it was Faf, the captain, to say, listen, you know the IPL is coming, some of us will be going to the IPL, but it would be advisable that, you as the CEO write to the CEO of BCCI and tell them that some of us need to come back early so that we can prepare for the World Cup. I said to both of them at the time that obviously I will support that thinking, but it would have been nice, had we, in our planning for the World Cup, spoke about this very early on and not literally a week before the tournament starts. I then phoned the CEO of BCCI at the time. It was Mr. Raul Jori, and raised this matter with him. He obviously wasn't unhappy because some of these players were drawing big commercial value for their respective IPL teams. And, you know, given that there was going to be a drainage of players from all over the world, as far as this tournament is concerned, their sponsors, you know, were already unhappy with them allowing players to be withdrawn from the tournament, because, I mean, they are paying in full to get all these players to be seen, you know, playing their part in this tournament. So Mr. Jory also raised this concern, said he doesn't see how BCCI is going to be happy with this decision, but with this request, but he would forward it to his superiors. I then spoke with our chairperson of the board, Mr. Nenzani, to ask him to speak with the secretary of the BCCI so that we can lobby for the BCCI to support us in recalling our players early. The chairperson said he would speak with the secretary of BCCI, but also what the chairperson said to me was, what Mr. Nenzani said to me was, but if players want to come back early, why is it that they too are not making that call? Because they too can tell their teams when they want to come back early, because now they're making it your decision. I then took that question from Mr. Nenzani, and then I phoned Faf, and I told Faf that, listen, I've spoken with the chairperson, and the chairperson feels that you are also at liberty to make that call to come back early. So if you, as the Proteas and the Protea management team, has identified a period when you would like to leave the IPL, come back home to get ready for the World Cup, why don't you then tell your respective teams? Because it wasn't also a BCCI/IPL decision, because you're playing for specific teams, so you'd have to tell your team to say, if it's the Chennai Super Kings, you tell the owners of Chennai and your coach that, listen, I'd also want to go back home early so that I prepare for the World Cup, and you state the reasons why you want to leave early and so forth. Now, to my surprise, about a day or 2 days later, I got another call from Faf where we were discussing this matter, and Faf then asked me that because Cricket South Africa, and this is how he put it, because Cricket South Africa wanted them to come back early, they were obviously not going to get paid in full for the tournament. Now, would I be in position to reimburse them for their losses as far as their IPL salaries are concerned? And I immediately said, I don't see how I can support this decision or that request. You are coming back to play for the national team at a World Cup at that, you know? And two, this request for you guys to come back early came from yourselves. I didn't ask you to come back early because there is, I think there was about a 2-week period or a week period, if I'm not mistaken, from the time the last match of the IPL would be played to our first match at the World Cup. Now, what I then said was, remember that even yourselves as individuals playing for these respective teams, you're not guaranteed to be playing the entire duration of the tournament. You could possibly get knocked out. Now, I don't see how I can sit and want to negotiate on your behalf why Cricket South Africa must reimburse you for the losses that you would suffer by coming back early from the IPL. Faf then expressed that this is how the players felt. I said, well, it's disappointing to hear that this is how our players are thinking. Nonetheless, I will let the board know. So I told the board. So this would obviously also be the same meetings, board meetings that we had before the World Cup.
Yes.
So I told the board that such a request had come back from players. And also, I remember we had discussed with Dr. Mohammed Musaji the player kitty, in terms of funds that were available to management. And there was a saving that was going to be made as far as the national team, men's team is concerned. And Dr. Musaji said to me at the time that, look, if you do not have budget for it, then I can take it from my kitty and then we use it to reimburse the guys.
Okay.
And that's essentially what motivated for me to then take the argument forward to the board. I then took the request forward, I presented it to the board. The board immediately rejected it. So there's no ways they can endorse or support such behavior. And that it would be creating a dangerous precedent where we are now paying players when they were not even playing for us. The board rejected it and said, irrespective of where the budget comes from, we do not support. So I went back to the team to let them know of this. And now, the funny thing is now, because now the board had refused to support this request, players themselves then stayed for the duration of the tournament, well, at least those that qualified to play until the final. But then again, after the World Cup tournament, when the report comes back saying because players played the full duration of the IPL, they were tired. And because now they were tired, they couldn't perform optimally at the World Cup, and that's what led to such a poor showing. One of these players that was labeled as being exhausted or tired was Kagiso Rabada, and it was in the media. I was put as a lackey for the BCCI because of how much money that they generate as a cricketing country, and how we stood to benefit by having strong ties with them. I was prepared to sacrifice the well-being of the national team for commercial reasons. And I didn't care about our players. All I cared about was money. So already, that was also in the media to say I've been unsupportive. So we never released these reports to the media, but yet contents of the reports made it into the media, so that the story or the rumor certainly of me being the guy who had been labeled as the one who was going to destroy cricket was now essentially coming to the fore, to say even our team performed way worse than what they'd been performing in the past under this guy. So you start this whole narrative of a fish rotting from the head. So, the team is performing this way because of problems that we are experiencing administratively.
And the board doesn't come out and say, listen, we took that decision. In any event, coming back, the decision was left to the players themselves.
It never made its way to the public. So it was left there like all other decisions that that I'm going to speak about as well. So we then obviously, I then dismiss the management, and I needed to immediately put a structure in place, because our team was leaving for India in about a month's time, if I'm not mistaken, and we needed somebody to step in and be the one to run the team. I asked Mr. Corey van Zyl, who was the acting director of cricket at the time, to run with that process. I specifically said to Corey, because you want to apply for this job on a permanent basis, this is an opportunity for you to show the board and our members what you can do in terms of being in charge of professional cricket holistically. So as acting director of cricket, I'm leaving this project with you.
Yes.
So you go look for an acting coach and a support structure for this acting coach, and help them get to a point where we have a team that's ready to go perform in India.
Yes.
Mr. Fanzale did so, and he appointed Mr. Enoch Ungwe. And before we announced it, I said to Corey, you know how it's going to look like in the media. And the reason why I had said that is because I grew up playing cricket with Enoch Ungwe. So already before then, there were rumors, or articles making rounds about how I wanted to appoint friends and, gain control of all cricket. So Corey said, listen, at the time, from a franchise point of view, Enoch was the most successful coach that we had in the system, and obviously one of the most qualified coaches. So to him, it was a no-brainer that he selects Enoch. And I said, okay, you have my support. We then announced Enoch as the acting coach. Obviously, it was met with negative reporting in the media. Quoting things like Enoch hadn't played enough professional cricket, he didn't play international cricket, so he wasn't going to perform at that level. But to us, it really wasn't much of a problem, because irrespective of who had been there before Enoch, we knew that we're going to one of the hardest places to travel and play cricket in, being India. And all our previously well-decorated coaches had never won, series in India. So even if Enoch was to lose there, it wouldn't be anything new. We've never won there before. So when I was asked by some members of the media if, I didn't feel that it was unfair to put Enoch under such pressure, I said, no, I didn't feel that it was unfair to put Enoch under this level of pressure. He needs it to grow. And that I raised the same point, that no other coach before Enoch had won in India. So it would be unfair of me to expect him, a month into the job, to go there and beat India in their home turf, when other coaches who've been doing it for years on end had never done it before. So no, we weren't expecting Enoch to come back with positive results. If he does, oh good, then we'll celebrate those results. But no, we weren't expecting those.
Mr. Moroe, it is my task to remind ourselves about the strictures of time under which we operate.
Yes, Chair.
As it is now that we should have come to an end, but I could stretch it for another 15 to 20 minutes. So if you could just focus on what you feel are very critical submissions which you would like us to take into account, then you can move in that direction.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I will try and move as swiftly as possible.
Yeah.
I'll talk about my personal matter with the board, where in December 2019 I received a call. I think it was on the 6th of December, if not mistaken, from the then Chairperson, Mr. Nenzani, and he informed me of the board's decision to suspend me as the CEO of Cricket South Africa, pending an investigation that they would conduct into my behavior. And that I would be given an opportunity to come and present my case at a disciplinary hearing. This was in December, as I said, and this was done telephonically. And I then only received my letter of suspension, I think, the following year. It was end of January, I think, or beginning of February. Needless to say that from a Cricket South Africa process point of view, our processes from a policy point of view were already being transgressed by the board in how it handled this matter. But because I didn't see myself being at war with the board, I just let it go, because I had good faith in the board in doing the right things in the right manner. I was obviously still talking to the chairperson at the time. He would phone me to find out how I was, because I was under serious attack from the media. There was a time, in fact, immediately when the announcement was made of my suspension, I received phone calls where my life was threatened, and the company then whisked me away from my home, so to put me in hiding, where I was even afforded protection. So, only a handful of people knew where I was. My family also didn't know where I was. Mr. Nenzani would call me from time to time to check up on me, on how I was doing, and he would tell me to switch off my phone because he was being hounded by the media, and he knew how the media had vilified me, and that the board would come out and ensure that the truth was essentially given to the public in terms of how I carried myself and what had transpired leading up to that decision. So one of the last phone calls I received from Mr. Nenzani was on the 20th of March last year, where he said to me, he was calling to check up on me again, and he also wanted to tell me how he saw things playing themselves out. And he said to me, Thabang, the media has made it so difficult for us as a board to get to a point where we can bring you back as the CEO of Cricket South Africa. I said, well, I can see how these matters are being reported on. But what do you suggest we do? Mr. Nenzani said to me, well, I suggest that we look at entering, conversations where we can part ways with you amicably, and we can announce such a decision, and then we take it from there. He then told me that he had a meeting the very same day and another one with the board the following day, and that if I didn't receive a call from him that evening, he would call me. I think it was on a Friday, the 20th of March. He would call me on the 21st, being a Saturday, to tell me what the board had decided in terms of him proposing that the board break ties amicably with me and move on from a cricket point of view. Mr. Nenzani's call never came. In fact, the next time I were to hear from Mr. Nenzani was him addressing the media, telling the media how I was going to be investigated directly. So now Fundutsi was now not going to investigate the entire operations and administration of the organization, but it was now asked to focus solemnly on me, and how if there were any transgressions that were found in my part, even legal ramifications would be sought, and where criminal charges need to be laid, that would happen. I was surprised to hear all of this out in public, because I thought I was still on good terms with the board. Fundutsi was then asked to come and conduct these investigations. This is when then I asked Fundutsi, together with Cricket South Africa, to give me access to certain pieces of information that I needed to use as evidence for my disciplinary hearing, which obviously I wasn't given access to. And one of the board members, Mr. Mario Skuman, then told the board that I didn't want to participate in the forensic investigation, and I was being arrogant about and taking the entire matter lightly. I found out through Fundutsi, and then I obviously contacted the Fundutsi guys through text and email to say, but I've never refused to come meet with you. In fact, you have proof of me asking for information from Cricket South Africa and them delaying to give me access and subsequently refusing to give me access to this information. So at which point did we, talking about me and my legal team, did we refuse to come, help you guys with the forensic investigation? Fundutsi then sent a letter to the board of Cricket South Africa saying it is unfair for Cricket South Africa to accuse them of having said that when they hadn't said that I've refused. So now there was now also this rumor doing rounds that I'm refusing to be part of this forensic investigation, which was obviously not true. So forwarding later, 6 months, because when I got suspended, I was told it was 6 months. When the chairperson spoke to the media, said 6 months, as far as my suspension is concerned. 6 months then came, and then obviously we were faced with a dilemma with my legal team to say, what do we do? Because the forensic investigation is still ongoing. They haven't gotten back to us in terms of the information we've requested for.
6 months was up to June 2020.
Correct. And, 6 months is now up, and I still haven't had my disciplinary hearing. We wrote to the board to inform them of this, and to also inform the board of the decision that we had now taken of saying, because 6 months is up, I also don't want me not coming to work to be used against me, to say, now you've absconded from work because we suspended you for 6 months. So I showed up for work. As per the letter that I had sent to the board. So I didn't come on the day I was supposed to, because we felt that by issuing them with a formal letter, it's sufficient enough to tell them of our intentions to come the following day. So the following day I showed up for work. I was then called by the chairperson and asked to go back home, and that they were still busy with the matter, and then only after the forensic investigation was concluded would they then make contact with me. Next thing again in the media, the chairperson and the board is announcing how I've been banned from coming to any of Cricket South Africa's properties, including these offices and cricket grounds throughout the country.
Yeah, what I would like you to, in your conclusion of
yes,
your
Chair.
presentation, is to remember the limited remit of my terms of reference.
Yes, Chairperson.
My terms of reference stated in the objectives of the Ombudsman are to promote unity and reconciliation by promoting equality in cricket and to determine the causes, the nature, the extent of the racial discrimination and lack of transformation in cricket structures since unification, including the antecedents, circumstances, factors, and context of such discrimination, as well as the perspectives of the victims and the motives and the perspectives of the alleged perpetrators, by conducting investigations and holding hearings and affording the alleged perpetrators the opportunity to respond to allegations leveled against them, establishing and making known the fate or whereabouts of victims and by restoring the human and civil dignity of such victims, by granting them an opportunity to relate their own accounts of the violations, and then, of course, compiling a comprehensive report to the board. So, whilst obviously, you are entitled to give us even an in-depth account of specific instances where you feel that you were not dealt with fairly as an ex or as a person who was involved, especially in the administration.
Correct.
We have to make sure that we don't lose focus of what the Office of the Transformation Ombudsman
Yes.
is mandated to do. So when I was inviting you to choose in the time that remains,
Yes.
specific issues that you would like to bring to our attention, it is always within
Correct.
the parameters of what our terms of reference allow us to do.
100%. My apologies, Chair, being long-winded in my
No, it's okay.
delivery. That's where I was getting to. So, in a nutshell, part of the charges that were then laid against me, coming from the Fundotsi forensic investigation, was the awarding of a contract, a management contract, consultancy contract to Tinanati Management that is owned by Mr. Unati Chotwan, and how I hadn't followed procurement processes in doing so.
Yes.
Yet the board was well aware of the position of this consultant being new in the company. We'd never had a position like this before. And because we had never had a position like this before, I felt that I didn't want to employ somebody who might not be able to deliver in this position. So let's rather get a consultant and get them to work for us for a year, and then we can evaluate their performances, and then we can go and appoint somebody permanently, which the board agreed to do. To do. And then I was then asked to headhunt, which is how I then came to Tinanati Management, announced my decision to award the contract to Tinanati before actually employing them. The chairperson sat with this person and agreed for me to go ahead, gave me the go-ahead to hire this person. So I was surprised at a later stage to have this allegation now being leveled as a transgression in my part. Yet, immediately after my suspension, 2 days, 3 days later or so after my suspension, Mr. Graham Smith was hired as a consultant in the position of Director of Cricket without any process being followed. And irrespective of the emergency that would have arisen in Mr. Smith being appointed so quickly without process being followed, 2 weeks later or so, his salary was increased by about 1.5 million without following any process. So I understand procuring his services as a consultant in an emergency kind of part and not necessarily following process, but still, one would need to explain what motivated his salary just shooting up by 1.5 million without, the remunerations committee endorsing that increase, without the board knowing about that increase. And one is to say, on the one hand, it is wrong for a certain person to do things a certain way, even though I feel I had followed proper process. But on the other hand, where process is not followed, by my counterpart or the acting CEO at the time, being Mr. Jacques Fall, that was okay. Graham Smith then went ahead and hired a whole string of consultants as well as managers without following any process. Increased their salaries from what they were from a benchmarking point of view without following any processes. And there's the very same board that investigated me and said, you are wrong of doing this. On the one hand, it's okay for others to do it. Which is...
And the marker here, I think that's what you want to say, is the attention of this project must be drawn to the attention, to the fact that where a white person does things, even if they do it without following process, CSA has to account to us as to why there is this disparity.
Correct.
Because
100%.
you have been pursued for obviously not following process, and you asking yourself, but what is it that I have done that the other person has?
Correct.
Why is there this disparity?
Yes.
And you, as I understand it, to say, is it a coincidence that?
Yes, Chair. Similarly, Chair.
Yes.
On the same breath, I'm being accused of, neglecting my responsibilities as a CEO and not having a credit card policy in place for the organization. This organization has never had a credit card policy. I had been CEO for a year. Why is it now all of a sudden my responsibility to ensure that CSA had a credit card policy when previous CEOs didn't ensure that the credit card policy existed? The previous CEO before me was a chartered accountant. That's part of his duties as a finance manager, to make sure that financial controls, like for instance, a credit card policy, needs to be in place. It wasn't there. The board was okay with that. But with me, it then gets used, because it was part of the rumors that was doing rounds in the media, to say I had apparently thrown a party and spent 300,000 at a personal party using a company credit card. But obviously the investigations came back and showed that such things never happened. But because the board had already supported some of these rumors that were doing rounds in the media, it was too late for them to come back and say everything that we had actually accused Thabang of doing, he didn't do. The procurement of 3TC for the Solidarity cricket tournament that happened didn't follow process. The monies that were spent for that tournament, where did they come from, where did they go, and why is nobody being charged or being investigated about the 3TC and who was involved in 3TC? We all know that media groups or the TV, so to speak, does not broadcast cricket for free, so to speak. There is a charge, whether it would be from a production point of view or procurement of certain services, but there's a charge. So now one has to wonder how the tournament took place without these charges or these monies exchanging hands. And why did Cricket South Africa had to be the one paying for a tournament to be held in its grounds where its staff was being used, where its players was being used? Cricket South Africa is the only mother body of cricket in this country. So why are we paying to host cricket when we are the ones who are supposed to be paid? So there's these disparities that I'm talking about in terms of, where I feel that because now we had a white CEO in place, things then became different. For instance, I read as well that in the media where an accusation was being made, or a revelation was being made rather, about how Graham Smith had also procured services of a PR agency without following process, because he felt he needed his own PR outside of the PR that was being done by the organization. No process was followed there still, but still no investigation or no findings, which I personally feel that is grossly unfair. The organization, or the board rather, came back to say to me that It was on 3 events where my credit card, personally, as the CEO, was used to pay for alcoholic beverages at these events. And they feel that the monies that were spent, which accumulatively come to about 90,000 rands, was grossly spent, and it was negligence in my part as the CEO. Yet, this was within budget. The expenditure was reported to the board before it happened, and at that, board members as well as member council presidents were even attending these events, where some of them were asking me to buy them expensive alcohol, form of whiskeys and champagne and stuff. And it's a norm that at cricket events, at the end of the day, either the CFO, should they not be available, the CEO would be the one that pays for the event, whether it's consumption of alcohol or food at this various event. But it was a norm that either the CEO or the CFO would be the one that pays for the event. Yet, the board decided to use these specific events to say I had misused the credit card, and yet in other events where I had paid for the credit card, for instance, I can vividly remember paying for the after party that was held at the awards, the Cricket South Africa Awards in 2019. So why is that not part of the charge sheet? Why are specific events at specific times being chosen to say this was abuse or misuse of a credit card, yet where other individuals paid using their company credit cards for similar events, it's okay? Why is it not okay in my case, but okay in other cases? I mean, the very same board at a later stage then decided to settle with my COO, Mr. Appiah, who was essentially facing the same charges. So why was it okay for them to all of a sudden retract and go back and say, okay, maybe this is not worth a fight? Yet the very same charges, I mean, his charge sheet looks 100% similar to mine. So where's the difference? That's the concerning disparities that I'm talking about here, Chairperson.
What happened with the disciplinary hearing?
It never came. The board then
still on
changed.
suspension?
No. After my suspension, the board then sent me a letter informing them of a meeting where termination of my contract for cause is going to be determined. And they needed me to attend this meeting. I then said, hang on, I was promised a disciplinary hearing to be chaired by an independent chairperson. And this was also recorded in public. That's what you said. That's what you promised the public. That's what you said to the media. The board said that they've changed their mind, and they had decided that termination for cause was the route.
Somebody came here, I think it was in Pile. I'm not sure if you share the same view that he held, that after you were removed or terminated, is it Jacques Faul?
Yes.
Was appointed to act. And shortly after that, Graham Smith was appointed. As you said, was
Correct.
appointed without following any processes.
Correct.
And appointed as a consultant.
Correct.
Do you share the view that you were removed to pave way for the appointment of Jacques Faul in order to appoint Graham Smith, who Graham Smith appointed, it is alleged, appointed Mark Boucher without also following the processes?
Correct. I do feel that's exactly what happened. Because, I mean, Graham had rejected the position. I think it was a day or so before my suspension. And he said he didn't have confidence in the leadership of this organization to ensure that it gave him, the space that he needed to perform his duties as director of cricket. I mean, a day or two later, I get suspended, and his thinking has changed. I'm the only one who had moved from the company. So where did that confidence all of a sudden rise from? And also, why did his contract include a clause that said, should Jack Fall not be the CEO of Cricket South Africa going forward, he would reject the position? So that in itself tells you that, yes, there was a plan to move me out the way, and I was moved out the way. And to date, I'm still confused in terms of how things turned out to be as bad as they are today, and where essentially it went wrong in terms of the relationship between myself and the board. Because there was no fairness in terms of the entire process leading up to date to where I've been with the board.
You are talking about the board, and
Correct.
the board that you are referring to is the interim board, as I
It
understand.
was a permanent board at the time,
At the
then
time.
interim board, and now a new board that's just come into place. So it's been 3 boards, so to speak, that I've had to
So
deal
you were
with.
terminated by the interim board.
I was terminated by the first board under Mr. Nenzani
Okay.
in August 2020. And then the interim board came. They too felt they didn't need to review my matter or sit with my matter. It must sit with the courts, so to speak. And it's still the same, even to date. So that's where one has serious concerns, because I've raised issues about, CEOs interfering in my duties as the CEO of Cricket South Africa. When we were working for Cricket South Africa to deliver a tournament, the Mzansi Super League at the time, I had a meeting with CEOs where I showed these CEOs a commercial proposal that was given to me by one of our partners for rights of the tournament. And that proposal was about 100 million rands a year. To which one of the CEOs replied, "It's impossible." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "How did you get to that amount?" And I said, "Well, I negotiated with the partner, and that's where we are." And he said he didn't believe me. So I then took out this proposal, and I showed it to the CEOs to say, well, if you want proof, then there's the proof. I'm in discussions with this commercial partner, and these are the amounts that we are talking about. A week later, we were at a team building exercise with the entire staff in Sun City. One of the CEOs called me, Mr. Nabil Dean, who was the CEO of the Cape Cobras at the time. He called me to say, "Listen, I'm not sure if you are aware, but there's a meeting that's happening at the Wanderers where CEOs are discussing that commercial contract you showed them and the league." And I said, "Why would these guys do so without my permission or my knowledge?" I raised it with the board to say I'm being undermined here. The integrity of the organization is being compromised. Also, we pay these guys salaries by way of stipends. We're the ones that subsidize them as the mother body. Why would they go and negotiate or discuss a contract of lesser value than the one that I was sitting with for this product? The board said they would handle it. Jacques Fall, again, was one of these CEOs in this meeting where they had met to discuss the commercial rights of Mzansi League. And they were discussing hosting the league at, I think it was at about 25 million a year, when I was sitting with a contract of 100 million. So it's like, cutting your own nose to spite your face. It made no sense, because we are part of one family. Why would you go behind my back to go and derail what I was working on? The following day, Mr. Greg Fredericks, who was the one hosting or essentially opened his premises to the other CEOs to have this meeting, he came to see me and he apologized for allowing that meeting to happen and for having been part of this meeting. I forgave Greg because he was man enough to come see me in person and apologize. And I still raised it with the board to say I need this matter investigated. And the board had assured me that there would be, these CEOs together with their provinces would be disciplined. Nothing happened. So there's various other instances that I can talk about where, you know, either a Jacques Fall or a certain other CEO was involved in doing something and no disciplinary processes followed. Nothing happened to them. And these were things that were directly interfering with my duties as the CEO of Cricket South Africa and the projects that I was working with. And the board essentially did nothing. Yet, at a later stage, you come back having trumped up charges from a bogus investigation where even Fundutsi told them not to release that report because it's damaging to some individuals, and Fundutsi hadn't obtained enough evidence can put what they had in their draft report at that as fact. So things that I was being accused of, even Fundutsi said, these are not established as facts. We cannot publish this report. But Cricket South Africa needed to move, and Cricket South Africa needed to make a decision in the position of the CEO. And Fundutsi was then forced to release the report, which still has a watermark that shows that it's a draft report. And this is the same report that was used against me to essentially or eventually dismiss me without being afforded an opportunity to even defend myself against any of the allegations. So, Chair, I will, as I said, I will forward an email to yourselves in terms of the meetings that you need to look at for what I have just spoken about to this commission, so that you can go through the minutes of these meetings to satisfy yourself with what I've just given as evidence. Also to give more from an evidence point of view in terms of things that are obviously included here, and I had jotted down as notes that I wasn't able to mention because of time limitations.
Well, thank you very much. For making the time, Thabang.
It's a pleasure.
It's the task we are confronted with, which is why I read you those terms of reference, is a very difficult task.
Correct.
And it is only when people like you find that it is incumbent upon them to accept an invitation. As you know, this is not a process that is as a consequence of a government gazetted process like
Correct.
the Zondo Commission.
Correct.
You know, you could even have said, go to hell, I'm not coming there, and I wouldn't be able to do all the things that have caused commotion in the country if you said, I'm not coming.
Yes, Chair.
You know, but you chose to come. And you chose to come at a time when you are able to say, at the end of the day, I was not dealt a fair card. And however more complicated our task is going to be, when we consider every bit of evidence that has been put before us, it clearly will be made lighter, because we now have both your written submission as well as your testimony today.
Yes, Chair.
We have, unfortunately, strictures of time. And sometimes one feels that 1.5 hours, 2 hours is not enough at all for any of the witnesses who come before us to give us the fullest extent of what the terms of reference themselves require that we should establish from people who clearly feel victimized. And it is clear for anyone, certainly to me, and this is not a predetermined view, that there are instances in your narrative, in your story, which show that you were not dealt with fairly, that certain things were done to you because they amount to discrimination. That's my prima facie view, based on what you have stated.
Yes, Chair.
And I will be stronger to make those views if there are people out there who feel that you have mentioned them unfairly, or where they might feel that they must come and clarify and say to me, no, Moroe he got it all wrong. And I will welcome that. But for now, thank you for having come.
It's a pleasure, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is the process for the day. We'll adjourn until tomorrow, 10 o'clock tomorrow. Thanks very much again, Mr.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay.